The announcement hit like a punch to the gut. Martin Hawthorne, CEO, stated coldly, "To save costs, your department is dissolved. Effective immediately." My team stared, stunned. Years of effort vanished in seconds. I wanted to scream, but my fists clenched under the table. Something inside ignited. I would not crumble. Not here. Not like this. I looked around the conference room. 12 faces reflected my shock. We had just saved this company millions last quarter. Our division streamlined operations, recovered lost clients, and boosted profits by 18%. None of that mattered now. Martin stood at the head of the table, adjusting his expensive watch. He avoided eye contact with everyone. His assistant shuffled papers nervously beside him. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, filling the terrible silence. My heart pounded. My mouth went dry. But I refused to let tears form. I had poured 3 years into Hawthorne Tech late nights. Missed birthdays. Sacrificed weekends. All for this moment of betrayal. As the room emptied, I knew I had to prove Martin wrong. Starting immediately. Just a year ago, I had been the rising star of Hawthorne Tech. I stayed late perfecting presentations while others went home. I recovered $3 million in lost revenue from a contract everyone else had given up on. Martin had nodded approvingly back then, though his praise lasted about 30 seconds. I remembered that victory clearly. The client was threatening to leave. Their complaints piled up for months. Nobody wanted to touch the account because it seemed hopeless. I studied every detail, found the gaps in service, and rebuilt the relationship from scratch. The client stayed. Revenue increased. Martin sent a brief email. "Good work." That was it. Now, those same strategies that saved his company were tossed aside like garbage. The presentations I perfected gathered dust in forgotten folders. The relationships I built meant nothing to him. I sat in my car in the parking garage, gripping the steering wheel. My phone buzzed with confused messages from team members. Everyone wanted answers I did not have. To earn respect, or maybe justice, I would have to leave and plan my comeback carefully. Colleagues confronted me in whispers over the next 2 days. They were angry, confused, and defeated. Emails piled up in my inbox. Clients asked why their main contacts suddenly disappeared without explanation. Nobody from upper management bothered responding to them. I realized panic was contagious. My former team was watching me closely, waiting to see how I would react. Some cried in the break room. Others updated their resumes immediately. A few just sat at their desks in shock, staring at blank computer screens. I needed clarity before taking any action. Rushing into anger would accomplish nothing. I had to think strategically, the way I always had. One afternoon, my colleague Brian pulled me aside near the elevators. He looked nervous, glancing around before speaking quietly. "Emma, you know my cousin works in consulting, right? He mentioned that your old mentor, Patricia, has been building something big. She is looking for talented people." My heart skipped. Patricia had taught me everything about operations management. She left Hawthorne Tech 5 years ago to start her own firm. Brian handed me a business card. "She asked about you last month. Said you were wasted here." A glimmer of hope appeared in the darkness. A late-night call from Patricia changed everything. Her voice was warm and confident as always. "Emma, I heard what happened. Martin is a fool. Always has been." I sat on my apartment couch, still wearing my work clothes at 10 p.m. Relief washed over me just hearing her voice. "I have consulting opportunities," she continued. "Mid-sized tech companies desperate for someone who actually understands operations. The pay is not amazing at first, but it is a start. More importantly, it is freedom." I hesitated. Part of me wanted to stay and fight somehow. Leaving felt like surrender, like admitting Martin had won. But another part of me knew that staying at Hawthorne Tech in any capacity would be professional suicide. "Can I think about it?" I asked. "Of course. But Emma, listen carefully. You are better than they will ever know. If you do this right, you can make them regret everything. Not through anger or revenge plots. just by being excellent somewhere else. Excellence is the best response to dismissal. Her words lit a fire inside me. I did not need to plot revenge. I just needed to be undeniably good at what I did. 2 days later, I accepted her offer. I started my consulting role with zero expectations and everything to prove. Patricia assigned me to a mid-sized tech firm called Garrison Solutions. They were floundering badly, bleeding money through poor project management and terrible client communication. I recognized their problems immediately. They were making the exact same mistakes Hawthorne Tech had made 3 years earlier, before I fixed everything. I implemented the strategies I had perfected. I reorganized their workflow systems. I trained their team leads on client management. I created tracking systems for accountability. Results appeared within 2 weeks. Their CEO, a woman named Angela, was amazed. "How did you see these problems so fast?" I smiled. "I have dealt with this before. Multiple times." Within 2 months, Garrison Solutions stopped hemorrhaging money. Client satisfaction scores jumped. Employee morale improved noticeably. I began to regain the confidence Martin had tried to crush. Meanwhile, Martin probably assumed I was scrambling for survival somewhere. He had no idea I was thriving. Patricia called me after the 3rd month. "Someone important has been asking about you." My recommendation saved Garrison Solutions over $2 million within 6 months. Their quarterly reports showed dramatic improvement in every metric that mattered. Angela promoted 3 managers I had personally trained. The company culture shifted from chaotic to focused. Word spread quietly through industry networks. Other consulting firms took notice. A few former clients from my Hawthorne Tech days reached out, asking if I was available for advice. My reputation was growing steadily, though I kept everything low-key and professional. Martin still underestimated me completely. I knew this because mutual connections mentioned he seemed relieved I was gone. He thought cutting my department had solved his budget problems. He thought I would disappear quietly. One Tuesday afternoon, I received an anonymous email. No sender name. Just a subject line, "Thought you should know." The message contained a link to internal Hawthorne Tech documents. Someone had leaked quarterly projections showing severe operational problems. The same issues I had prevented from happening were now spiraling out of control. Budget overruns. Missed deadlines. Client complaints piling up. Everything pointed to disaster. I forwarded the email to Patricia without comment. She called me within the hour. "Emma, this changes things. Keep watching Hawthorne closely." Martin announced a new initiative to modernize operations 3 months after dissolving my department. The announcement appeared in an industry newsletter with his photo attached. He looked confident, almost smug, describing his vision for efficiency and innovation. He excluded me and everyone from my former team entirely. No consultation. No acknowledgement that we had built the systems currently keeping the company functional. I watched the project spiral from a distance. Budget estimates were wildly optimistic. Deadlines made no sense. The implementation plan ignored basic operational realities. Within 4 weeks, everything was behind schedule. Within 8 weeks, the budget had doubled. Client complaints started appearing on social media. Employees began leaving anonymous reviews on job sites describing chaos and confusion. One evening, I received a message from Trevor, my former teammate. He still worked at Hawthorne Tech, though he was actively job hunting. "Emma, it is a nightmare here. Martin will not listen to anyone. He keeps saying everything is fine, but we are drowning. I saved some project reports. Thought you might want to see how bad it really is." He sent encrypted files showing critical errors throughout Martin's modernization plan. Proof that he could not fix problems without help. I saved everything carefully. I quietly collected documentation over the following weeks. Email chains forwarded by former colleagues. Project notes they smuggled out. Client complaints they copied before deletion. Everything was legal and above board. Nobody asked me to spy or steal. People were just frustrated and wanted someone to see the truth. I organized it all methodically. Spreadsheets showing budget failures. Timelines proving missed deadlines. Client feedback demonstrating declining satisfaction. The pattern was undeniable. I realized I had leverage without even approaching Martin directly. The evidence spoke for itself. One document stood out particularly. A competitor called Vanguard Tech was struggling to implement the exact same kind of operational strategy that Hawthorne Tech was failing at. They had hired expensive consultants who clearly did not understand the complexity involved. Patricia noticed my interest. "You thinking what I'm thinking?" "Vanguard needs someone who actually knows how to do this," I said. "And you are the only person in the region with that expertise," she added. Opportunity was knocking loudly. I answered by contacting Vanguard CEO directly through a professional introduction. Within a week, I had a consultation meeting scheduled. This was bigger than revenge. This was about proving my worth undeniably. I took Vanguard Tech as a client and implemented my strategy flawlessly. Their CEO, a sharp man named Howard, gave me complete authority to redesign their operations from the ground up. I worked harder than ever. 16-hour days. Weekend planning sessions. I trained their entire management team on systems I had developed through years of trial and error. Within 1 quarter, Vanguard Tech outperformed Hawthorne Tech in every measurable category. Their efficiency increased by 23%. Client retention hit 94%. Revenue grew steadily month after month. Martin remained completely oblivious. Industry reports mentioned Vanguard's success, but he assumed it was luck or market conditions. He never connected the dots. He never realized I was the architect behind his competitors' sudden dominance. Investors started asking questions though. Board members at Hawthorne Tech noticed the performance gap. My name came up in analyst reports comparing the two companies. Patricia forwarded me an article from a tech industry publication. The headline read, "How Vanguard Tech Turned Operations into Competitive Advantage." My strategies were described in detail, though my name appeared only in small print as a consultant. Martin must have read it. He must have felt something then. A high-profile client cancelled their contract with Hawthorne Tech in spectacular fashion. The announcement made industry news. They cited management failures and operational incompetence publicly. Media coverage highlighted specific errors. Martin's face appeared in video interviews, visibly flustered and defensive. He blamed market conditions. He blamed employee turnover. He blamed everything except his own decisions. My strategies had indirectly exposed his failures to the entire industry. I had not attacked him. I had not badmouthed anyone. I just did excellent work elsewhere, and the contrast became obvious. Trevor messaged me again. "Emma, Martin tried calling former employees for advice yesterday. He is desperate. He did not call you though. Too proud, I guess." I smiled at my phone. Pride was about to cost him everything. Investors were becoming vocal in earnings calls. Board members started asking uncomfortable questions about leadership and direction. The pressure on Martin was mounting visibly. Patricia took me to lunch that week. "You know this is just the beginning, right? He is going to crash completely. And when he does, opportunities will appear." I nodded, feeling a mix of satisfaction and anticipation. I watched as Martin's decisions worsened outcomes throughout the fall. Each failed initiative reinforced my growing influence externally. My consulting success built undeniable credibility. Martin's confidence began to crumble, though he refused to admit anything publicly. He gave another interview trying to reassure investors. His voice wavered slightly. His talking points sounded rehearsed and hollow. Analysts were not convinced. Meanwhile, my client list expanded. Vanguard Tech recommended me to 2 other companies. Both hired me immediately. My calendar filled with projects, and my income tripled what Hawthorne Tech had paid me. One afternoon, an investor named Mr. Caldwell reached out directly. He was on Hawthorne Tech's board and held significant shares. "Miss Emma," he said on our call, "I have been watching your work at Vanguard with great interest. The transformation there is remarkable. I wanted to understand your approach." We talked for an hour. I explained my philosophy on operations management, system design, and team leadership. He listened carefully, asking intelligent questions. At the end, he said something that made my heart race. Hawthorne Tech is facing serious instability. I may need your insights soon. The pieces were falling into place perfectly. I leveraged industry connections to gain access to detailed data about Hawthorne Tech's situation. Everything pointed to one inevitable conclusion: the company would fail without serious intervention. Martin's modernization project had become a disaster, draining resources. I realized I could dictate terms when the right moment came. Not out of spite, but because I possessed expertise they desperately needed. Patricia and I strategized carefully. Do not seem eager, she advised. Let them come to you. Desperation works in your favor. The waiting was difficult. Part of me wanted to rush in and fix everything. But I knew timing mattered more than speed. Then something unexpected happened. Trevor accidentally copied me on an internal email meant only for senior staff. The message was panicked, desperate, full of warnings about failing projects and angry clients. If we do not stabilize operations by next quarter, investors will demand leadership changes. We need outside help immediately. Does anyone know consultants who specialize in our situation? Several people responded, suggesting expensive firms with mediocre track records. Nobody mentioned me. They probably assumed I wanted nothing to do with Hawthorne Tech. They were wrong. I wanted everything to do with it. On my terms. I approached Mr. Caldwell directly with a carefully worded proposal. I can help stabilize Hawthorne Tech. But I will not do it as a regular employee. I work as an independent consultant with full authority over operational decisions. He listened intently. We met at a quiet restaurant, away from anyone who might recognize us. I presented a brief analysis of Hawthorne's problems and my proposed solutions. This will work, I said confidently. But only if I have complete authority. No interference. No second guessing. Martin hired people who told him what he wanted to hear. You need someone who will tell him what he needs to hear. Mr. Caldwell smiled slightly. You are not fond of Mr. Hawthorne, I take it. My feelings are irrelevant, I replied. Results matter. I can deliver results. The question is whether your board wants success badly enough to empower someone. Martin dismissed. He agreed to monitor my recommendations through an external advisory role. I now had undeniable influence over Hawthorne Tech's future without technically working there. Martin noticed the shift. Mr. Caldwell started mentioning my strategies in board meetings. Other investors began asking why they were not consulting me directly. Martin's power was slipping visibly. Hawthorne Tech reported plummeting quarterly numbers in November. Stock prices dropped 12% in one day. Analysts downgraded their ratings. Martin tried micromanaging the same employees I had once led, thinking tighter control would fix problems. It only made things worse. Morale collapsed completely. More people quit. Projects fell further behind. Client cancellations accelerated. Trevor sent me a desperate message. Emma, it is beyond saving now. Unless something changes immediately, we are all updating resumes by Christmas. Martin made a desperate call, according to Mr. Caldwell. He asked the board to bring in emergency consultants, not knowing they had already contacted me. The board demanded I intervene directly for stabilization. They understood the situation clearly. Martin did not. He thought he was hiring some anonymous consultant firm. I agreed to help, but under strict conditions. I sent a detailed contract outlining my terms, consulting authority over all operational decisions, full acknowledgement of my role publicly, and compensation reflecting my actual value. Martin had no choice. The company was circling the drain. I was his only lifeline, though he did not know it yet. He would have to negotiate with me personally, something he had never done before. I set terms that made my position clear. Double my previous salary, paid as consulting fees. Complete leadership autonomy over operations. The right to restructure teams without approval. Final authority on all implementation decisions. Mr. Caldwell presented these terms to Martin in a board meeting. According to people present, Martin's face went white when he saw my name on the proposal. "Emma," he apparently said. "You want me to hire Emma?" "You do not have a choice," Mr. Caldwell replied. "She is the only person who can fix this mess. And frankly, you created this situation by letting her go." Martin tried to argue. He suggested other consultants. He claimed my terms were unreasonable. The board shut him down immediately. They scheduled a meeting for the following Monday. Martin would have to sit across from me and beg for help. The irony was not lost on anyone. I prepared carefully. Professional outfit. Calm demeanor. Clear documentation of exactly what needed to happen. Patricia helped me rehearse. "Remember, you are not doing this for revenge. You are doing this because you are excellent at your job. Stay focused on results." When Monday arrived, I walked into Hawthorne Tech's headquarters for the first time in 8 months. Employees stared. Word had spread somehow. Whispers followed me down hallways. "She is back. On her terms." The negotiation room was the same conference room where Martin had dismissed my department. I noticed the irony immediately and said nothing about it. Martin sat stiffly, flanked by Mr. Caldwell and 2 other board members. He looked tired. Older. The confidence had drained from his face. I presented my analysis of Hawthorne Tech's problems. I outlined solutions step by step. I explained timelines and resource requirements. Everything was professional, detailed, and undeniable. Martin tried interrupting twice. The board members silenced him both times. Finally, Mr. Caldwell asked, "Miss Emma, do you accept this engagement under the terms you specified?" "Yes," I said simply. "If Mr. Hawthorne agrees to full operational authority without interference." Martin looked at me directly for the first time. Something flickered in his eyes. Anger. Humiliation. Resignation. "Agreed," he said quietly. Papers were signed. Terms were set. I was now the operational authority at Hawthorne Tech, paid double what they had paid me before, with complete autonomy. As we left the room, employees gathered in clusters. Their eyes showed disbelief and hope. Trevor gave me a subtle thumbs up from across the office. I had returned. But not as a subordinate. As a leader. Walking through Hawthorne Tech felt surreal. The building looked the same, but everything had changed. Employees approached cautiously, unsure how to address me now. "Ms. Emma. Can we call you that?" One junior analyst asked nervously. "Just Emma," I said. "Same as before. But things will be different now." I met with my former team members whose morale had cratered. They looked exhausted, defeated, running on empty. Some had stayed out of loyalty. Others had stayed because job markets were tough. None looked happy. "I know this is weird," I told them in an impromptu meeting. "I know you have questions. Here is what you need to know. I am here to fix this. You will have support. You will have resources. You will have leadership that listens. Starting now." Relief flooded their faces. A few people wiped away tears. The failed modernization project sat on my desk in massive binders. Hundreds of pages of confused plans, contradictory instructions, and wasted effort. I needed to act immediately. The damage was deep. Clients were still canceling contracts. Employees were still quitting. Revenue continued declining. But I had a plan. And now I had the authority to implement it without anyone stopping me. I implemented my restructuring plan within the first week. Deadlines were reset realistically. Budgets were realigned based on actual needs, not wishful thinking. Clients received personal calls from me explaining changes and rebuilding trust. The response was immediate. Teams stopped spinning their wheels on pointless tasks. Productivity increased as confusion cleared. Employees visibly relaxed under guidance they recognized and trusted. Martin tried intervening twice in the first month. Both times, I politely but firmly redirected him. The board gave me operational authority. Please trust the process. He backed down both times, though clearly unhappy about it. A critical client named Stephanie who had threatened to leave met with me personally. She had been loyal to Hawthorne Tech for 6 years before recent disasters pushed her toward cancellation. "Emma, I remember you," she said during our video call. "You fixed my account 3 years ago when nobody else cared. If you are leading operations now, I will give Hawthorne another chance." She renewed her contract. Other clients followed her lead. The bleeding stopped. Stability began returning slowly but surely. Employees thanked me in hallways. "It feels like we can breathe again," one manager said. "I worked longer hours than ever, but it felt different. Purpose drove me instead of desperation." Investors noticed my impact quickly. Quarterly reports started showing improvement in key metrics. Media coverage began praising new operational leadership at Hawthorne Tech. Industry analysts specifically mentioned my name as the driving force behind the turnaround. Martin was forced to acknowledge my influence publicly in an earnings call. His voice was tight with controlled emotion. "We have brought in expert consulting leadership to stabilize operations. Early results are encouraging." He could not ignore the obvious anymore. My strategies were working. His had failed. During a board meeting in late January, Mr. Caldwell stated directly, "Miss Emma's leadership has prevented complete collapse. We owe her significant gratitude and continued authority." Martin tried to assert control over a minor budget decision that afternoon. I held veto power under my contract terms and exercised it calmly. "That allocation makes no operational sense," I said. "It will undermine the stability we have built. I cannot approve it." The board backed me immediately. Martin's authority had dwindled to nearly symbolic status. He was CEO in title. I was CEO in function. He knew it. Everyone knew it. The power dynamic had completely reversed. Former teammates who had left Hawthorne Tech during the chaos started returning. They reached out asking if positions were available under my leadership. I rehired 6 people in the first month, placing them strategically. Morale surged throughout the company. Productivity spiked measurably. My department became a model that other divisions tried to emulate. Employees trusted me implicitly now because I had proven myself repeatedly. Martin's presence became increasingly marginal. He attended meetings but rarely spoke. When he did, people politely listened and then looked to me for actual direction. Investors pushed for long-term strategic changes requiring my continued control. They wanted guarantees I would stay beyond the initial consulting period. I negotiated a new contract extending my authority for 18 months with options to convert into permanent leadership positions. Martin had no input into these negotiations. The board handled everything directly. Trevor approached me one afternoon looking emotional. "Emma, I just want to say thank you. You saved us. You saved my job, my career, everything. We would have collapsed without you." "You all did the work," I said. "I just gave you the structure to succeed." "No," he insisted. "You did more than that. You proved that talent wins eventually." Martin attempted to implement a minor policy change without consulting me, thinking he could assert some remaining power. The policy would have undermined team flexibility I had carefully built. I corrected it calmly in a staff meeting. "That policy conflicts with operational efficiency. We will not be implementing it." Martin was present. His face reddened slightly, but he said nothing. Investors observed the exchange. Board members nodded in agreement with my decision. Martin was forced to follow my lead publicly. His authority had evaporated almost completely. He was CEO in name only now. After the meeting, Mr. Caldwell pulled me aside. "Emma, the board is discussing permanent leadership restructuring. Your position here has become essential. Martin understands this, though he will not say it aloud." I felt no triumph, only satisfaction. This was not about humiliating anyone. This was about proving that excellence mattered more than titles or pride. That evening, I allowed myself a moment of reflection. 8 months ago, I had sat in my car gripping the steering wheel, feeling crushed. Now I controlled the entire company's operations. The journey had been exhausting, but worth it. A company-wide announcement credited me explicitly for stabilizing Hawthorne Tech Media praised my ethical leadership and strategic brilliance. Industry publications requested interviews. Universities asked me to speak about operational management. Martin could no longer claim victories for decisions I made. Every success was publicly attributed to my strategies. His name appeared in company communications only as a formality. The contrast was stark in investor presentations. Slides showed before Emma and after Emma metrics. The improvement was undeniable and dramatic. Client satisfaction scores reached record highs. Employee retention stabilized completely. Revenue returned to growth trajectories. Stock prices recovered most of their previous losses. Martin attended a board meeting where these results were presented. He sat silently through the entire presentation. At the end, Mr. Caldwell thanked me specifically while Martin said nothing. I had the moral high ground and operational control. But the story was not finished yet. One major milestone remained: the annual board review where long-term strategy would be decided. That review would determine whether my authority became permanent or temporary. Everything depended on that meeting. I restructured reporting lines throughout March to ensure efficiency and clarity. Teams understood their roles. Communication flowed smoothly. Accountability was clear at every level. Martin was technically still CEO, but he deferred to my strategies on every significant decision. The company now ran on my vision, my systems, my leadership. Employees adapted quickly. The old chaos became a distant memory. People arrived at work knowing what to do and why it mattered. I consolidated relationships with key clients personally. They appreciated direct access to operational leadership. Several increased their contracts because they trusted the new stability. Competitors noticed. Vanguard Tech CEO called to congratulate me. "You accomplished in months what takes most consultants years," Howard said. Remarkable work. The upcoming board review loomed large. Patricia helped me prepare presentations covering every aspect of operations. We practiced answering tough questions. We documented every success and addressed every remaining challenge honestly. "This is your moment," Patricia said. "You have already won. Now you make it official." The board scheduled the review for mid-April. Everything I had worked toward led to that day. The board review was comprehensive and intense. I presented results, projections, and long-term strategy for 3 hours. Charts showed dramatic improvements across every metric. Client testimonials praised the transformation. Employee surveys demonstrated restored morale and commitment. Investors asked challenging questions. I answered each one confidently, backed by data and clear reasoning. I acknowledged remaining obstacles honestly and outlined plans to address them. Martin attended but said almost nothing. He looked resigned, defeated in some fundamental way. His credibility had suffered irreparable damage through his own decisions. At the end, Mr. Caldwell asked the critical question, "Miss Emma, are you willing to continue in operational leadership long-term?" "Yes," I said. "If the board grants me the authority to maintain strategic consistency." The board voted unanimously. I received operational autonomy officially, formalized in my contract on my terms. Martin would remain CEO nominally, handling external relationships and board communications. But I controlled everything that actually mattered. The meeting ended with handshakes and congratulations. As people filed out, Martin approached me quietly. "You won," he said simply. "I understand that now." I met his eyes. This was never about winning. It was about doing excellent work and being recognized for it. He nodded and walked away. I sat in my new office reflecting on the entire journey. 8 months ago, Martin had dismissed my department coldly, assuming I would disappear quietly. He had been completely, utterly wrong. I had been humiliated, dismissed, and underestimated. But I returned stronger, smarter, and in complete control. Martin, desperate and out of options, had been forced to hire me back at double my previous salary. I earned full operational authority and genuine respect throughout the industry. Victory had been earned ethically, powerfully, and definitively. I did not gloat. I did not humiliate anyone unnecessarily. I simply proved my worth through undeniable excellence. Trevor stopped by my office that afternoon. You know what everyone is saying? They are saying you are the best thing that ever happened to this company. I smiled. We all did this together. I just removed the obstacles. Patricia called to congratulate me. You turned dismissal into dominance. I am proud of you. Looking out my office window at the city below, I felt complete satisfaction. Not because I had crushed an enemy, but because I had proven that talent, skill, and integrity eventually triumph over pride and poor judgment. Martin had tried to save costs by cutting my department. Instead, he paid double to bring me back and gave me everything I wanted. The lesson was clear: never underestimate the people you dismiss. They might return with all the power.